Hello and welcome back to the MELT podcast. Joining us today, we have Dr. Alexandra Read, who is an edtech teacher, a researcher and consultant, but also a former head of learning for technology at the Girls' Day School Trust, where she led strategy and transformation across a national network of schools. Her work centers on aligning cultures, community through purposeful leadership. Dr. Read, welcome to the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tobias, for that introduction and for inviting me to talk today.
My pleasure. So a quick question that I sort of like to ask everyone on the show. What sort of HR challenges do you think are unique to your industry?
I think there's a very high turnover of teachers. I think there's a substantial burnout factor. And I think that essentially they're underpaid for the kind of work that they do and the time commitment that they have and the dedication they have. So I would say that keeping and retaining great talent and great teachers is probably one of the biggest HR challenges that we face in the education sector.
And just for those who don't know, maybe you can give sort of a brief overview of that technology strategy that of course, you led at the Girls' Day Schools Trust as well.
So the tech strategy that we have at the Girls' Day School Trust is wrapped around the values of the organization, which is about putting girls first. And in female education, it's all about empowerment and making sure that our girls are front and center of everything that we do. So when I worked with the school leaders and the edtech leads to develop a digital strategy that could be deployed across the trust, it was about making sure that it wasn't just a digital strategy for the sake of digital, because I think it throws up too many whys. Why are we doing this again? And so part of it was building a strategy that was very much bespoke for our organizations, which put our organizational values were wrapped inside it. So our digital strategy is called Her Digital, and it's very relevant to a time where AI is moving very rapidly. The landscape around technology is evolving at a rate of knots, and I think there's a lot of unknowns. And so by developing a strategy that's specifically about girls and for girls, it became much more of an intuitive step for everybody to take. And the why was really taken out of it because it's essential and everybody could see the purpose.
Absolutely, yeah. And so maybe, again, this is perhaps a little bit off piece, but I'm now quite interested myself. For those sort of listening at home who perhaps are in the sort of infancy of their careers, let's say, how would you go about actually creating a people strategy like this? Because like you said, it's not enough to say, hey, we're going to go for HR digitalization just for the sake of HR digitalization. So it sounds to me that you focus more on listening to what needs to change and build your strategy based on the objectives of that change. Is that correct?
I think change management is an integral part of this. It's like it's a focal point, isn't it? And I think change management has got a bit of a ring to it, and everybody's like, "Oh no, change management! Oh, that's terrible." So, and it's almost like there's change just for the sake of change. Why do we have to do this? So, for me, when I was looking at Her Digital, I think it was really important for me to look at the landscape that surrounds us. The financial, the economic landscape, the cultural landscape, and understand how all of those elements would tie into it. I did a lot of talking with the senior leaders. I did a lot of talking with students and staff and a variety of the stakeholders in the communities that we serve, including parents and teachers. And I think it was important for me to understand what it meant for them to be working in this current environment here in the 2020s with all of the things that are going on nationally and internationally, and how that what that meant for them, and to try to assimilate all of that into the strategy and make it relevant to the organization and to their roles. So it was a big project, but I think having a voice and listening to the voice of the communities that we serve was a really big part of this.
Definitely. And so I guess my next question is a bit of a split between an A and a B, but I guess A is one, how did you sort of unify that why under that strategy on a practical level as well, I guess? And B, what happens when an organization doesn't have that common why, or when each sort of team member is working from a different sense of purpose?
Well, I mean, I think to answer the second part of your question first, if you don't have a really clear purpose and a really clear direction and a really clear why that people can relate to, you don't get any traction on fresh ideas or fresh approaches, and I don't think that's because there isn't an appetite for the changes that you might be proposed in from a leadership perspective. I don't think it's about people sort of disagreeing and refusing to embark on new projects. I think it's more just that they sort of forget, and they sort of have to remember what was the reason that we're doing this again. But if it's
Mm,
very much a part of the organization, oh, we're doing it for the girls, we're doing it because it's important at this particularly at this time in our lives, to understand why technology is an integral part of what we do and how important it is to look at it from a female perspective, because essentially, it's a marginalized group. And if we don't look more carefully at how AI and other technological and digital innovations affect that particular sector that we work in, we're really we're putting ourselves on the back foot.
yeah, absolutely. And so you've built a strategy that is kind of explicitly tied to your organizational values in, I guess, what is a mission-driven environment. So perhaps just walk us through how you made that connection really tangible and also practical.
So our organizational values are about putting girls first, being fearless in the way that we approach the educational environment that we work in, having very much a family approach. We're a family of schools, 26 in its total. So, and also being forward thinking. It's a good. There's all four of them are F's. It helps you remember them. But I think from an organization, it's a very tight way to describe what our core values are. And these core values have been in place for a long time. The organization are very well embedded in the organization. And I think part of it, when I started to develop digital strategy, was to use these values as a lens to look at technology. So I
Mm,
took a very close look at how we use technology in a fearless way in our schools. What is it about technology that helps us have a more progressive or forward-thinking approach to the way that we're learning as students, and that we're teaching as teachers, or we're leading as school leaders? And the family piece was important, because I think that sometimes technology gets it's technology tends to compete with the human elements, especially in robots and AI and all of that. Is it's human versus robot, but we're very much a family organization, a family of schools that puts girls first, and human values front and center. So I think looking at technology with those specific lenses helped me really pick out how a digital strategy could address all of those in a way that was unifying.
mm, yeah, absolutely. And again, this is going off piece now, so I hate to sort of surprise you with the question, but what did you find when you began looking at how technology was being used through that sort of lens of company culture and pillars? And I guess on a practical level, what did you do with those findings as well?
So what I found was that lots of stories. And I started to find, when I was talking with colleagues and visiting schools and seeing how technology is being used in schools, and talking to students about what they love about technology, and also what they found challenging about learning, and the same with staff and school leaders. What I found was there's lots of different stories, and I started to build a narrative, and I began to understand that it's almost like the changes going on in front of us. And so by gathering those stories, I felt that we were beginning to redefine the narrative about how technology is used in women's education, and for the reasons that are embodied in the organizational values. And so it was almost a self-fulfilling experience, that as I collected the stories and understood how technology was revolutionizing the way that we teach and learn, and specifically the way that we deliver education that is bespoke for girls. It became clear to me that the stories were building a new narrative, which put the female experience and the human experience at the very forefront of the why of digital and the why of technology, and why it's important to use it as a resource in teaching and learning.
Mm. And I guess in a large sort of educational trust like yours, motivation can't depend purely on pay alone, let's be honest. So how are you able to inspire culture and motivation that goes beyond what you make at the end of every month?
I think teachers are very dedicated people, and
Mm.
they go above and beyond to make their lessons exciting and engaging, and to help their students achieve their personal goals, and make school an exciting and enjoyable place to be, a place where they feel safe, where they can take risks, where they can make friendships and learn together in a collaborative way. So I think educators will never be always be working for a paycheck. They're working for things that are much greater than that, and I think that
Mm.
is very much tied to how they feel in their environment. And when you're teaching in a classroom successfully, it's a really strong relationship between the students and the teachers. It's a relationship of value and respect. And I think when teachers feel that they're valued and respected in their schools, they will put 110+%, maybe it's unquantifiable, actually, the amount of
Yeah,
time
yeah.
and effort that teachers will put into it. But that also happens on the other side. So that's what makes the magic happen, when teachers work to create lessons that are really high quality, and that students work in order to be able to find their own self-actualization through their learning experience. And it comes from that value and respect piece, and feeling appreciated. And I think acknowledgement and finding ways to celebrate success and achievement is a key part of that motivation. And great school leaders
Mm.
do that very naturally. Schools are actually very good at doing that, especially the GDST.
What needs to happen in order to bring recognition, not just through individual teams, but sort of actively working and enabling motivation and culture across a whole organization? What actually needs to happen at a sort of strategic level, do you think?
I think recognition in the leadership teams of each other's work and each other's achievement is very, very important. And I think that a regular sharing of those successes, and also challenges as well, helps members of a team understand each other's working experience, helps them build levels of respect for each other, because they have insight and a perspective of what each other are doing. I mean, a lot of team members collaborate, and so that comes in the collaboration process quite naturally. But across teams, where collaboration may be less apparent, having the visibility of what each other are trying to achieve in different departments in an organization, I think really builds that unity, and also the respect for for each other, both on a formal and informal level. And I think people become far more approachable when you have an idea of what they're doing in their roles, and when you can share those kinds of stories with each other and share your narrative. Again, I'm back to storytelling, but I do think storytelling is a human experience, and I think there's a sense of joy in every story. There's always a protagonist and an antagonist. That might be the challenges and successes. There's always a beginning and a middle, and sometimes the end is worth waiting for and coming back to. And it's about revisiting and reconnecting with people who you may not necessarily work directly with, but it does build a sense of understanding. And I think with that, you begin to develop layers of respect and admiration for each other, which are sort of implicit. We don't necessarily have to have a gold award and badges to say that we're employee of the month. But when we know about each other's stories and the human experiences that we share, and sometimes they can be, I mean, to use an American expression, a water cooler story, where you're just you're just having a brief chat maybe in a corridor, or having a coffee in a lounge in the staff room, or in in an informal way, but you're chatting about things that are relevant to your role and involved in the organization. And I think that does really bring together different departments which might otherwise work very differently. For example, in our organization, the estates team and the innovation and learning team and the finance team, their paths don't cross very often. But when people come together and explain about their successes, especially in terms of sustainability, I think that everybody can see the benefit of that, because we're all looking to reduce our carbon footprint. So when we can share stories about how we've contributed to that in our different roles and different departments and different team, it brings us together for a common purpose. And that essentially is a greater purpose beyond even our organization. And I think that is successful leadership, when we can find that pathway to being something which is essentially, if you like, philanthropic. And I think, in an organization which is a non-for-profit, there is a sense of philanthropy in what we do. And, the greatest joy comes from thinking that we're doing something that is a legacy that we can leave behind us, as we're just mortals.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree. Okay, that's really amazing, actually. Maybe just one final sort of off-piece question again, just to sort of wrap up. Perhaps if you can just give an overview of the approach you would take to building this strategy. Again, just coming back to that question at the beginning of, perhaps I've never done this in my career, or I'm at the start of my career, or I'm, at university, I'm still learning. How can I detect that something is wrong? How can I diagnose the problem? And how can I then create a strategy that directly addresses that problem, as you have done?
I started with conversations, and I think that conversations with stakeholders is probably one of the strongest parts of my strategy building approach. And I think finding a way to allow people to talk without feeling that they have to talk about anything in particular really helps sometimes unearth the problems that you're trying to understand better. So when I'm having conversations, I tend not to be too structured in a way that I kind of brief the conversation, and that helps things emerge that possibly might not do if I did have a very strong structure to the way that I was talking to colleagues. And I think also gathering together and assimilating the information in a meaningful way that can be clearly imparted to like other senior leaders, so they don't get too lost in the trees, but they can see the wood. And I think when you've got a lot of information and a lot of data, I think presenting it in a way that is meaningful to other stakeholders, so they can help them understand what the problems are that you're trying to address, and also get some kind of support and buy-in from what you're proposing in the strategy. And I think if you present your strategy with clarity that is relevant, and they can see where you're the journey that you've come on to be able to share this information, I think that's very, very helpful. And so I think when it comes to finalizing a digital strategy, if you've got something that can be imparted in a very short period of time, and clearly easy to recall, that helped as well. I think I went through a number of iterations for what to call the digital strategy. I think for a while it was the next generation digital strategy, and it just wasn't right at all. And then suddenly it was very clear that it should be her digital. Of course, why not? Why next generation digital strategy? No, it should be her digital, because it's about girls. And I think sometimes that happens. You suddenly get a sort of an epiphany or a moment of lucidity, and you think, oh, of course. And I think I don't have to give a lot of detail about her digital for you to know what it's about. And I think that was it's an easy message to share when you've got a structure and a strategy that it represents what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Dr. Alexandra Read, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Super insightful conversation. Thank you very much.